looking for just an example that you've seen of ICT making a real contribution to education.
We have just started new projects on this because I haven't seen them yet. There has been a lot of visions and talks and strategies and policies, and I think it's very important. But now it's sometimes you get fed up with all these discussions. It's sorry, I'm not. Sometimes you need to see some real action. So we have started some kind of projects now, but we have just started them. Mm-hmm. So we don't know really yet if they are going to be a success or not.
Okay. David, I bet you've got a story or two.
Well, I could talk for a long time about all the benefits of Oracle software, but I won't. This is not a sales pitch, so
that's good.
I think hook.
However, I do have to say that Oracle is very generously sponsoring our breaks and our box luncheons, so we do thank you for that.
Thank you. I think in the context, as I was mentioning before, Oracle Academy, it's while it's all, you hear this often, it's all about the kids, it's also a tool for professional development for professors, teachers, because Oracle Academy is the post-secondary education component, but Oracle Academy is under the Oracle Education Foundation, and there's a K-12 component called ThinkQuest. Some of you may have heard about that. It's an online, secure learning platform for students to engage in learning projects anywhere in the world. So students in Ottawa can work with students in Stockholm or in Maryland or wherever it may be on the history of a country or whatever it may be. So this is very much a professional development tool for instructors as well. And what we do under Oracle Academy is that we offer 9 weeks of online training and then 5 days of face-to-face interaction of learning, so that not only are the students graduating, going into the workforce and helping to build an ICT, IT knowledge workforce, but it's also the instructors who are learning about the innovation. And I know that innovation is a very sexy buzzword. It's been around for the better part of, 50 years, and it goes through different definitions and terminology and all that kind of stuff, but that's really what this is about. The benefits of a multinational software hardware company investing in our education workforce, in our education sector, to ensure that the adults, for lack of a better word, the adults, the instructors, have that top level knowledge so that they can apply it not only to the students but in the workforce as well. And so I think that's one example. And Oracle's not the only company that does this. We heard from Cisco earlier this morning. They have an excellent Cisco Academy that is well embedded in Canada and across the world, and other companies have this as well. So this is, I think, really an emerging trend that unfortunately is not as well known as it could be. That, of course, my work and other people who are doing this work will hope to build that out and promote it as we go on.
What's inside that ThinkQuest toolkit?
It's curriculum, and it's a platform that's embedded into a school board organization that then goes and migrates into the actual school itself. And as I say, it really is dependent on the teacher.
Yeah.
And so they build a program and they build it. So every school is different, Robert. But essentially what we do is we provide the software, we provide the support and training. And that's really what, as I've said before, Oracle Academy, this is about a life cycle. This is about getting kids interested in technology at a very young age, and that's not Twitter, Facebook, texting, Blackberries, iPhones. That's all very sexy stuff. We all know it. We all live it. Many people in this audience right now are on their Blackberries. But the fact of the matter is...
No, they're not.
But the fact of the matter is we need to get our younger cohort more interested in technology from a business standpoint as well as the technical side as well. That's what... You can buy a piece of technology. You can buy it from Oracle, absolutely. Please do. But at the end of the day, you have to have a business case. So there's a technology component and there's a business component to it as well. I'll just conclude on one final point. A Canadian telephony company, TELUS, recently issued a report, I think this was about 3 months ago, that said by the age 7, when a child reaches the age 7, they are fully wired in IT. They understand, well, not IT, but they understand the cell phone, they understand the texting, they understand the Facebook, they understand the Twitter. We have to respond to that. Governments have to respond to that in the context of citizen service. They have a responsibility of understanding that, my God, by the age of 7, Kids are going to be interacting with their government. And what does that mean for them? Where are the opportunities that lie in terms of revenue generation with parents or whatever it may be? So these are all the things that an Oracle Academy program looks to address as it relates to building that knowledge workforce.
Did you want to you were shaking your head at me. Do you want to...
No, I just want to make a short comment on the digital inclusion because I'm sure you're right, but you have to deal with the differences in the pupils' social background.
Mm-hmm.
We just got a report this week in Sweden that 67% of the pupils with high educated parents, they are very used to internet, but 25% of the pupils or students to low educated parents are not. So digital inclusion means that you have to prepare and to develop tools so you're not you're avoiding the risk that you're not excluding the people or groups of people who are already excluded.
Absolutely. How about you, Joanne? Can you give us an example of something you've seen that you think works in terms of using ICT in education?
Let me give you an illustration that I actually find really thrilling, and it relates to the digital inclusion point, I think. And as an aside, I should say that as the parent of a 7-year-old, who has no experience of any of the things you just mentioned, and deliberately so, I've tried to protect him, and I'm sitting here wondering if I've done him a favor or not. I think, Twitter at 7, troubling thought. But we know that our children...
It's like a joke of Bill Cosby's. He talked about having his tonsils out when he was 8. He said his whole life flashed before his eyes. It was so short he had to ask for a rerun. So anyway, go ahead, sorry.
My illustration is from the city of San Francisco, which has been extremely active in trying to use infrastructure and applications at various levels in innovative ways, particularly to help low-income communities and young people. And here's just one illustration of one of the things they've done that I think is a really interesting mix of different layers of ICT in the education context. The city built city-owned fiber optics from the Academy of Sciences, which is in Golden Gate Park, which is a really tremendous green building with a green roof and all kinds of absolutely fantastic assets in teaching about education, teaching about agriculture, teaching about healthy eating and healthy living. And they built fiber optics from there to many of their boys and girls clubs in some of the poorest neighborhoods of the city, where children are not very likely to go to the Academy of Sciences on regular field trips, and even if they were, may not have the language or the experience to get a lot of benefit from it. And over those fiber optics, the city then partnered with a series of different nonprofits who use a piece of software called Cocoa Deep over the fiber that requires very high bandwidth. It is interactive digital software that takes all of the motifs and the aesthetics of gaming, which in low-income communities among young people are actually very familiar pieces of technology. Digital inclusion, I think, what the city has done that's so innovative is it's recognized that among low-income young people there will be enormous familiarity with wireless gadgets, with gaming, with avatars, with certain kinds of online resources, not necessarily the educational ones that we're talking about here. And by taking a piece of software that creates an online virtual world with avatars in which people are able to communicate, share ideas, share video, but do it with the motifs of gaming, where a child will be an avatar and the teacher at the Academy of Sciences will be an avatar, and learning things will be done through sharing an avatar actually handing or demonstrating a piece of video as opposed to showing video on a TV screen, which may have less meaning to that child. That this is a more meaningful way to engage and to learn, and possibly to create an entry ramp to the educational aspects of the internet and the online world that wouldn't necessarily be there for that child otherwise, because they may not have a PC at home, but they probably have gaming experience. Now this requires a whole bunch of different things, including, very importantly, that fiber infrastructure, because it's very high bandwidth. But that, I think, is a very exciting and interesting use of ICT in a variety of different ways. And that would be my urban example. I have a rural one as well, but I'll hold off
come back.
maybe later.
Okay, I'm still on. So Don, based on your 25 years on your recovery program from being a university planner, what's an example of something that works?
Let me give an organizational example and then a very granular one. The organizational example would be the University of Central Florida, which is a burgeoning and emerging research university in the middle of Florida that literally serves a region from the Atlantic coast to the Gulf. They have a main campus, 11 regional campuses, many of which are located on the campuses of community colleges. They have a new medical school, they have telemedicine, they have all this tied together in a way that students can elect to have a physical, a blended, or a virtual learning experience, and can do it on a variety of campuses and places. And this is so that we don't forget that when we're dealing with this, we're dealing with real physical places too, and the blending of the physical and the virtual. And they use this to sculpt enrollment and services across the service area in a way that really is quite fascinating and sophisticated, and is a harbinger of the things to come in terms of how they use the data mining from how people learn in those different settings to meet all these different learner needs. So that's an organizational example that also has administrative parts to it as well as the academic. In terms of the granular example, a boundary busting example actually comes from Europe, where some of my colleagues, including Ambjörn Neve at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, are working on a European Union funded project called ROLE, Relational Responsive Open Learning Environments, where they are building open learning environments based on Web 2.0 mashups in communities of practice to show how we can build learning communities and experiences that are free range, that are open, that are free, that are independent of organizational environments, and in the process deal with two of the major problems we have, which is a talent gap, but also a mismatch between what people know and what they need to know for jobs. And they're specifically targeting them for that purpose, and ICT obviously is essential to that.
My own big epiphany occurred when I was in the city of Fredericton in New Brunswick, Canada, and I walked into a classroom in which I thought I'd walked into a study hall. And because there were about 25 kids all bent over laptops, and the teacher was in front of the audience, in front of them on a laptop, and I thought, okay, well, they must have homework or something. But I walked in and I talked to them, and what they were doing was they were all working on a literature lesson. And the teacher had posted very simple technology. The teacher had done a blog post that was a set of questions, and each of the students was responding. And I talked to the teacher about it, and I said, so what do you think of this? I expected him to say, oh, well, I don't like this. And he said, I love this, he said, because for two reasons. One, he said, I get to hear from everybody, not just the 5 children who raise their hands every class. And then I can manipulate what I'm seeing. I can drill down into one student, and I can see that student's responses to this day's instruction, as well as yesterday's and the day before and the day before. I can assess progress. I can get basically, the ability that we get out of data manipulation to change the perspective of what we're seeing. And it was a very minor example, and it's not sophisticated technology, but what impressed me was that he had used the technology to utterly change his approach to instruction. So to me, we're just as you said, we're just getting started. We're just getting started on that kind of transformation.